Hi friends! Today we're talking about what to watch for once you've gotten your baby goats through that first critical week. We're talking about the most common problems we see in the first month after goat kids are born, what to watch for, and what to do. I'm also sharing about a big loss we had this year, what we learned from it, and I'm reminding myself that it's only a failure if you don't learn something. Listen in and learn how to keep those goat kids healthy until they're ready to wean. Let's get to it. Hey friends, welcome to the Get Goatwise podcast. Are you longing to raise goats and other animals for food but don't know where to start? Do you want to be more self-sufficient and less dependent on the grocery store? Do you wish you had a mentor to walk you through raising livestock? Hi, I'm Millie, animal scientist, cattle girl turned goat rancher, co-owner of Dry Creek Livestock, and simple living enthusiast. For 15 years, I've been on a mission to raise all of our own meat, eggs, and dairy. Here, we'll talk about raising goats and other homestead livestock, how to create sustainable animal management systems that actually work, and a bit of off-grid life with kids and livestock. If you're ready to take control of your food supply, raise livestock with confidence, and provide your family with the most nourishing meat, eggs, and dairy available, you're in the right place. Kick off your muck boots, pour a cup of coffee, and let's talk livestock. Hey there! The first combined newsletter from Dry Creek Pastures went out on Friday. That was a big mountain to climb on the tech side, but I'm very excited about this new change, and I hope you are too. It'll be everything in one place once a week. Lots of recipes, stories, tips, podcast links, and photos from the ranch. And I think it'll be really valuable to you in your livestock raising and self-sufficiency journey. I'd love to hear what you think of it. And if you're not getting the newsletter yet, come join the fun at getgoatwise.com/insider. What's happening on the ranch? I hope you all had a wonderful 4th of July. We had a beautiful rainstorm with lots of lightning and thunder, and it was very much appreciated. It's been a while since we've seen rain, and everything feels so clean and fresh when we've had a good storm. I didn't even complain about putting on my muck boots for chores last night. Hay is stacked tightly in the stackyard with just our little patch of hay in town to finish up. We purchase most of our hay or pay someone to put it up for us. We just don't have the equipment or resources to do our own, and right now, it doesn't make sense. Our goal is to extend grazing and lower our hay requirement, so investing in haying equipment is not something we plan to do anytime soon. The kids are growing and playing and getting into all sorts of mischief. We had to pen all the goats up while the hay was being delivered because they would have been in, around, and under equipment, and something would likely have gotten run over. So for their safety and our sanity, they spent the day in a night trap with hay. It's been almost 6 weeks since the commercial goats started kidding, so we've got quite a bunch that are a month old now. We spend a lot of time talking about kidding and keeping kids alive at birth, and rightfully so. That's when most of the death loss happens, right at kidding or within the first few days. Average non-predator death loss in lambs and kids is 15%, and that number is calculated at weaning. So any death loss from now until we wean the kids counts in that percentage. So once we've got them through the first few days, what do we watch for that could be problematic? First, rejected kids. This happens most often in first-time does, especially if they've kidded at the beginning of the season when none of their friends have kids yet and they don't want to get left behind. And it's more common if they've had a hard birth. This usually happens within the first week. But with triplets, if you leave all 3 on the doe, it can be later. We've seen most triplet rejections about 6 weeks out. And I think this is because the doe knows she can't feed them all any longer, so instinct tells her to kick one off. Goats are funny though. Even though they stop feeding a kid, they still keep it with them a lot of the time. Cows don't do that, so sometimes it can be hard to tell if a kid is actually rejected or just failing to thrive. Depending on the situation, we may pen the doe in the barn with her kid or kids and see if she starts to pay attention to them. Especially with first-time does, we want to give them every chance we can to be successful, but we also don't want to keep genetics around that aren't strong in the maternal department. I'd say this is successful about half the time, and only if you catch it early. If the doe has no interest in her kids or she's trying to kill them, and they will do that, we'll just put them in the bottle pen and mark her as a cull. We didn't always do this in the beginning, so don't think you have to if your goals are not the same as ours. If you only have a few goats and you're okay with it, pen each doe when they kid so they have time to bond and everything should be fine. A lot of people barn kid forever, and that's fine too. We have just chosen to do things different, and I'm not saying that's the way everyone should do it. Here's a quick explanation of why we decided to move to a pasture kidding management system versus barn kidding. First, when we got the Spanish does, they did not do well in the barn kidding system. It stressed them out. We had more orphaned kids and more death loss because the does were trying to save their own lives rather than care for their kids. They had never been penned like that, and it was very hard on them. That was our big reason to start shifting to pasture kidding. Second, disease management. Barn kidding brings up a whole new level of sickness and disease spread where pasture kidding pretty much eliminates that. We managed for that the best we could, knowing that it was an issue, but pasture kidding has eliminated most of that. Number 3, disease and sickness mean medication, usually antibiotics, and that was not in line with our goal of raising goats as close to nature as possible. Now, I'll always doctor a sick animal rather than watch it suffer, but if changing our management system lowered the sickness rate and therefore how often we were treating sick goats, we were ready to give it a try. Fourth, scaling. Growing our herd and barn kidding was not going to make sense long term. We just don't have the barn space or resources to barn kid hundreds of does. This could be a whole episode in itself, and maybe someday it should, but for now, that's why we pasture kid. So, watch for rejected kids, but just because a kid is by itself or hangs out at the barn with no mom in sight doesn't mean it's rejected. I've been watching one of ours for a couple weeks. She's small, but she was a small triplet at birth, and I know exactly who her mom is. I keep thinking her mom has forgotten about her, but every time I pick her up, she's hard to catch and her belly's full, so she's getting fed somewhere. I check on her every day, and yesterday she was out grazing with her mom. So I think it just took a little longer for her to be ready to travel to graze because she was so small. So mom bedded her down at the barn and came back for her. That's common behavior with goats. The next thing we watch for is eye problems. Entropion eyelids will start getting symptomatic by the first or second week after birth. We watch for crusty, cloudy eyes and treat them. We also mark the mom as a cull. Again, you don't have to cull for entropion, and we didn't for years, but we're at the point where we want to have a high-producing, low-maintenance herd that will make great starter stock for other people who want to raise goats without all the problems that often come with them. We treat the entropion eye with wound clips and curacin, vetricin, or terramycin in the eye, and then we watch them. If it isn't improving, we'll remove the clips, treat, and patch the eye. I've never had patching fail yet, and I'm getting better at patching eyes without gluing myself to the kid. This year, I've only treated one kid so far for entropion, and that poor kid is entropion in both eyes. So I patched one eye first, but the second one was getting worse because of the sunlight and dust, so I patched both eyes and brought him and his mom in the barn so he wouldn't wander off into trouble. Hopefully, he'll be good as new once the patches fall off. As soon as one comes off, we'll put them back out with the herd. One problem we see in the Boer goats, but rarely in the Spanish goats, is accumulation of sticky milk poop, which can block them from being able to poop. That stuff dries as hard as concrete. I'm sure there's some fancy term for this problem, but it's basically poop stuck on their behind that their mom should be cleaning off and she isn't, so we sometimes have to do it for her. I just grab the kid and clean it off. Done. Also, watch for respiratory problems. This is much more common if you barn kid, and it can be slow and persistent or rapid and deadly, or anything in between. Watch for snotty noses, cough, loss of appetite, fever, typical pneumonia symptoms. We haven't seen pneumonia in our goats in probably 5 years. We even vaccinated the show goats for it at one point, but we hadn't had a pneumonia-related loss in a long time. This year, I learned something new. This happened so fast, my head was spinning. It started with one goat in the bottle kid pen. He had a snotty nose one evening. The next morning, he was hunched up in the corner with no interest in a bottle, and by evening, he was dead. Less than 24 hours. Of course, because they were in the barn together, the rest of the babies had it within a couple days, and even though I treated them, it was too late. We lost all of the bottle kids in 4 days to rapid pneumonia. I've heard of it before, I was aware of it, but I've never had it in my goats. The only goats affected were the bottle kids. They were already susceptible to sickness just being bottle kids, and they were hanging out in the barn in a group of other illness-susceptible kids. Even though we've been very successful raising bottle kids for years, we had a big loss this year, and I learned another lesson. The only thing I could have done differently was to be here more so I could have seen the problem sooner. I've been on the road a lot lately, family stuff, hauling meat, and I just didn't have my eyes on them enough to see what was happening in time to have a good chance of fixing it. But now I know. I also need to be fast when treating bottle kids because they don't have the immune system like the dam-raised kids, and they succumb to illness so much faster. Anyway, it was a sad loss and a big percentage of our death loss up to this point, but we learned from it and we carry on. Another thing we watch for is overeating disease. We'll usually see this at about a month old, and it's typically in kids that have a mom who produces a lot of milk. This isn't the same as the overfeeding problem we had last year, which was so strange and didn't happen at all this year. We haven't seen overeating disease in years. We've been focusing on moderate milk production and culling heavy milking does, so that pretty much solved the problem there. As a bonus, that allowed us to stop the CDT vaccine. We still give CDT to all bottle babies, but otherwise we don't give it anymore. If we had high milk producing goats, we would continue to give CDT. Last is scours or diarrhea. There are lots of causes for scours, but the biggest one we've dealt with is coccidiosis. This happens in goats older than 30 days because of the incubation period for coccidia. Now, coccidia in goats at a small level is normal and actually results in the kids getting some level of immunity to getting sick from it. Illness occurs when there is an overgrowth of coccidia, which causes lesions in the digestive system, and you'll see diarrhea with or without blood, usually with a bad odor. They'll go off feed and just be sick. However, scours can be tricky, so this one is best handled by talking to a vet and getting some fecal samples looked at so you know that you're treating for the right thing. Almost all causes of scours are compounded when goats are in close quarters. So if they have adequate space, clean bedding, and fresh pasture, problems with scours are much less. Overall, we're watching for failure to thrive, using the human term. Kids that aren't growing as fast as the others or aren't tail up happy, running and playing, that's one of the very cool things about goats. Their tails are a very good indicator of well-being. If their tail is droopy or down, it's a good idea to pay attention. If they look gant, like they haven't been fed in a while, their sides are sucked in behind their ribs, watch those goats. Watch for dehydration. If you keep an eye out for these specific problems, as well as just looking for kids that don't look happy and healthy, you'll be able to catch problems before they get really bad. It takes time to learn what to look for and to be able to notice when a kid isn't doing well. I think the only way to speed up that learning is by watching a lot of animals, noticing how they behave when everything is well, and then you'll notice quickly when things are off. The more time you spend noticing now, the more likely you'll be able to catch a problem early later on. Early death loss in kids is definitely the biggest percentage of overall death loss, but these later losses can add up fast, and many are fixable or preventable if you catch them in time. I hope this episode gives you some things to look for so you're able to keep your goats happy and healthy. And if they're not, you'll notice right away so they have the best chance of survival. See you next week. Hey there, thanks for listening today. I'm so glad you're here. If this episode helped you or encouraged you in some way, share the link with your homesteading friends. And if you really want to help me out, click on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and a review. You can connect with me on Instagram or email linked in the show notes, and meet me back here soon for more Get Goat Wise.